I'm going to call this meeting of the New Hanover County Board of Education to order. If everyone would please stand for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and the playing of the national anthem. We can pray. Heavenly Father, we're thankful for the opportunity to gather together today, the opportunity to come together to discuss things that are important to the education of our students, of our future. Be with us as we have these discussions. May they all be civil. May they all be meaningful. Guide us in our deliberations. We also especially pray for those who serve in our armed forces, especially for the families of the 16 who were lost yesterday in Mississippi. Be with them, comfort them, guide and lead them to know that they were serving their country and that they were doing that which ought to be done. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good. Color guard, return.
If everyone may be seated. I see it is Troop 239. If the members of Troop 239 would come and introduce themselves. And anybody else who's here with them to help out. Let's see, there's a microphone right down there, if you would. And would you tell me also what church or who are you affiliated with?
We're Troop 239, and we are with Myrtle Grove Presbyterian Church. And I am Nathan, and I go to Myrtle Grove.
I'm Tim Fortunato, and I am homeschooled.
I'm Clay Thompson, and I'm homeschooled.
I'm Tim Shibley, and I'm homeschooled.
I'm Don Evans, and I'm homeschooled. I'm Dwayne Kelly. I'm the Assistant Scoutmaster of Troop 239, and we are very honored to be here tonight to do this. One other quick thing, Tim and his brother, will you please tell everybody what you got Thursday night?
Eagle Scout.
Really?
Mike got board. So board review and that is my last requirement for my Eagle Scout.
Now, how could you forget that?
He didn't.
And then the young.
I'm Darren Jans, and I'm from Ashley High School.
Okay. And our trumpeter was George Mayo. George, would you?
I'm George Mayo III, and I will be a freshman at Wingate University in the fall.
And thank you so much.
Thank all of y'all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Adams, would you please call the roll?
Edward B. Higgins,
Here.
Jeanette S. Nichols,
Here.
Janice A. Kavanaugh,
Here.
Lisa Eastet,
Here.
Donald S. Hayes,
Here.
Bruce T. Shell,
Here.
David L. Whitman.
Here. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or deletions?
No.
All right, then do I hear a motion we approve the agenda as presented?
Move for approval.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is approved. Next item is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of June the 6th, special meeting of June the 6th, and a special meeting on June the 20th. I'm going to take them all together unless somebody has a specific comment about an individual one.
Move for approval.
Move for approval. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
They are approved. Next,
Read that announcement. It says, please announce. Be sure to do that.
if the audience would please remain seated until the conclusion of the recognition ceremony. When exiting the meeting, please leave in an orderly as possible.
And quietly.
I don't know what y'all want.
Good afternoon, everyone. At this time, we will have a special presentation by our board chair, Mr. Ed Higgins.
Don't we go on?
As some of you know, I have a reputation for being somewhat long-winded, so I intentionally wrote down what I wanted to say to keep it down as concisely as I could. It is my pleasure, on behalf of New Hanover County Board of Education, to take this opportunity to express our appreciation to the members of the New Hanover County Board of County Commissioners for their dedication, commitment, and support of the students of New Hanover County. This year, the County Commissioners, by unanimous vote, agreed to fund the school system at a rate of $2,700 per student for the 2017-2018 school year. This increase in student funding will allow the school system to continue to fully support the academically gifted and academically and intellectually gifted programs in our school that were threatened by the state budget slashes. New Hanover County Commissioners have a long history of working with the New Hanover County Board of Education to provide a premier school system for the students and citizens of our county. Their willingness to increase their commitment to the school system is another example of the strong partnership that exists between these two boards. At this time, I'd like to ask Skip Watkins and Jonathan Barfield, Vice Chairman Watkins, come up, if y'all would come up. I'm sorry. See, when I get off my speech, I start making mistakes. Anyway. Vice Chairman Skip Watkins, Commissioner Barfield, and also to take this opportunity to thank the other members of the Board of Commissioners who are not with us today, Chairman Woody White, Commissioner Rob Zappel, and Pat Cusick, and to present them with this token of our appreciation for what you and the entire board has done for us. And what this says is, in recognition of your outstanding dedication, commitment, and support to the students at New Hanover County Schools, presented by the New Hanover County Board of Education, July the 11th, 2017.
I know.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. And next, we'll recognize some of our very talented middle school singers who auditioned and were selected for the North Carolina All-State Middle School Chorus. As I call your name, would you please come forward and remain standing for a group picture? From Roland Grice Middle School, Zoe Wilcox, Amelia Del Savio, Damian Sorrells, Sadie Dunn, Grace Robertson, and Ella Pfeiffer. These students were led by their teacher, Noah Melton. From Holly Shelter Middle School, Tia Rose, Clara Hicks, Layla, oh, there she is. We're so happy the kids came off their summer vacation, so. Layla Quinn and Haley Goldberg. Those students are led by their teacher, Jeremy Milligan. And finally, from our Noble Middle School, Emerson Benjamin, Natalie Burton, Emily Lane, and Riley Moore, led by their teacher, Vicki Chenault. So we have two brave young ladies who came out. Congratulations, students, and thank you again to our county commissioners. And that concludes our ceremony.
Next item on our agenda is administrative recommendations, Appendix A. Dr. Markley.
All right, we got a bunch of these. So let's start with the assistant principal recommendations. If the board would like, I'll read all of the assistant principal recommendations. We'll take them as a group. Does that work?
Actually, if you want to, I got out of order. I apologize.
Okay.
The call to the audience, I had skipped over that. We have had one person to sign up for it. Lynn Shoemaker. I am sorry about that. I got it myself. I would remind you, it's 3 minutes, and you can't talk nasty about us.
Yes, good topic.
Well, it's good to see you again, Ed. I was going to start by saying, let me begin by thanking you for the opportunity to speak tonight. And I knew when I registered to do this that I would be talking about something that is an issue of importance to everyone in this room. My name is Lynn Shoemaker, and I'm a 35-year resident of New Hanover County. and a former classroom teacher here in this building. I left the classroom to work with the North Carolina Association of Educators, but I never left public education. I remain a staunch advocate for both the rights and the responsibilities of public schools, public school employees, and all students. So I come here tonight from several national and state organizations and foundation platforms to speak to that issue which I know is important to us all, providing for and protecting all our students. I'm talking about clean water. The most basic resource we provide for all our students, our children, is clean water. 32 days ago, the newspaper and other reputable media outlets broke and ran stories of a chemical cocktail discovered in the Cape Fear River. It includes, but is not limited to, one called Gen X, which is a C8 replacement chemical. And we know that C8 causes cancer among lab mice, and we know that the discharge of C8 into the Ohio River Valley adversely affected the health of residents there, including children. And although Gen X was intended to be a less toxic chemical than C8, and although there are no long-term studies to its effects, and although it is currently unregulated, I think we can all agree that our students should never be guinea pigs for manufacturers or anyone else. Never. It's been over a month and we're still waiting for answers, and in the meantime, not enough residents know that their water has been contaminated. And so I'll say that New Hanover County Schools is an education institution, and it does know, and it understands scientific probability and outcomes, and so it is not unreasonable to expect our public school system to lead the way in taking precautions to safeguard our most valuable resources, our children and their water. So I ask you at this time to use your means to inform and educate your families about the contamination of the Cape Fear River and its impact on their water, and that you move to provide safe water alternatives to your faculty, staff, and most importantly, your children. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Now, administrative recommendations.
All right, we have a number of assistant principal recommendations, so what I'd like to do is take, unless somebody has a specific one that they would like me to pull, is do those as a group. And if they're here, I'll ask those folks to stand and introduce themselves after we get through the recommendations.
Okay.
Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Agreeable.
All right, following assistant principal recommendations. For the position of athletic director / assistant principal at Ashley High School will be Kelly Lewis. Assistant principal of Blair Elementary School, Elizabeth Harkin. Assistant principal at the International School at Gregory, Sherry Ashley. Assistant principal at Laney High School, Michael Owen. Assistant principal at Murray Middle School, Kimberly Clark. Assistant principal at Myrtle Grove Middle School, Kristen Branch. Assistant principal at New Hanover High School, Chris Haney. Assistant principal at Parsley Elementary School, Rosemary Wheeler. Assistant principal at Snipes Academy of Art and Design, Stephanie Willis. And those are the assistant principal recommendations.
You want to just vote on those first?
Yes.
Move,
All right.
move for approval.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? They are approved.
All right, would our assistant principals who are here tonight, our new assistant principals, please stand. Please remain standing, and starting with Ms. Clark, since she's the closest. Would you introduce yourself and who you have with you, and let the board know what your assignment was before this new one?
Kim Clark. I am assigned to Murray Middle School for that fantastic team over there. I have my husband Adam here with me, and I'm super excited about this next journey.
Ms. Clark worked in our EC department, that's informally at Sunset Park.
Okay. All right, we'll start on my left and we'll.
I'm Roman Wheeler. I am accepting the position at Parsley Elementary School. I'm coming from Mercy Williams, having taught 4th grade. I have my husband, Britt, my 2 sons with me tonight, Ricky and Robbie. They're both students at Potter. Hi, I'm Christine Branch. I am the new AP at Myrtle Middle. I'm happy to be going home there after 10 years. I was teaching there earlier. I was last year at J.C. Rowe. I have my son, Makai Branch, who's a student at Williston, and my dear friend Lynn Fulton here tonight.
Sherry?
I'm Sharon Ashley. I will be accepting a position at International School of Gregory. I have my son Peyton. His name, he is a student at Anderson Elementary. My husband Norm Ashley, he teaches at Murray Middle School. And I have a wonderful principal support right here. I have my current principal, Mr. Rothbud, my current assistant principal, Ms. Carey, and then will be my new principal, Ms. Lampley and Ms.
I'm going to be the new assistant principal at Blair. I see you. I have my husband Eric with me, and Dr. Cochran right here with me as well. And I've been the instruction coach at Rice Beach Elementary School.
My name is Kelly Lewis, and I will be the new assistant principal athletic director at Eugene Ashton High School, where Principal McCarty. And I am coming from Charlotte. I've been athletic director at Independence High School for the past 14 years. And I'm excited, but since I am from Charlotte, this is who I brought.
If we could, we would like to get all of those new assistant principals to come up here, get together, so we can take a picture, so we can post it on the website. So if y'all would come on up, and don't be shy.
See them again. Bruce.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I would like to recommend Karen McCarty to be the principal at College Road Early Childhood Center. She currently serves as the Blair Elementary School assistant principal, previously served as an assistant principal at Alderman and a teacher at Laney High School and then Pender. She has a bachelor's in English with teacher education from NC State, her master's degree in education and curriculum and supervision from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, and currently is a doctoral student at UNCW. I recommend Ms. Karen McCarty.
All right, you have heard the recommendation of the superintendent. Do I hear a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? It is approved. Would you have her stand?
Ms. McCarty, would you please stand? And I think you got somebody with you.
Yeah, my husband had a party with me.
All right, the next recommendation will be for the supervisor of arts, and I'll ask Dr. LaShawn Smith to make this recommendation.
It gives me great pleasure to recommend Jacqueline Booth. Currently, Ms. Booth serves as the technical manager for New Hanover County Schools. Previously, Ms. Booth served as the theater teacher, general manager, technical director of Minnie Evans Art Center at Ashley High School. along with being the master electrician at the UNCW Theater Department and an English instructor at Cape Fear Community College. Ms. Booth received her bachelor's degree in English and a master's degree in English from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. So we'd like to recommend Ms. Jacqueline Booth for the position of Arts Education Supervisor.
You have heard the recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? It is approved. If you'd like to have
Thank you.
Ms. Booth? Who do you have with you?
I have my parents, Jen and Cindy Booth, very proud parents, and my much better other half, Robert Booth.
I'll also ask Dr. Smith to make a recommendation for Title I Instructional Supervisor.
Yes, the name of the recommended candidate, we have a lot of Jackies tonight, is Jacqueline Richardson. Ms. Richardson is currently a K-5 instructional coach, reading specialist at Sunset Park Elementary School. Previously, she was a teacher at Myers Park Traditional Elementary School in Charlotte and a teacher at Blunt Elementary and Bradley Creek Elementary Schools with New Hanover County Schools. Ms. Richardson received a bachelor's degree in elementary education from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. She received a master's degree in literacy from Queen's University of Charlotte. So the recommendation for the position of Title I Supervisor is Jacqueline Richardson.
You have heard the recommendation. Do I hear a motion to accept it?
Move for approval.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? It is approved. If you would stand up and thank you. All right.
We have one last recommendation, and that will be from Dr. Holliday.
Thank you, Dr. Markley. Members of the board, I would like to, with great pleasure, recommend Tanya Jordan. Mrs. Jordan is currently the school counselor at Wilmington Early College High School. Previously, she served as counselor at Ashley High School, Hoggart High School, and Holly Shelter Middle School. She's also the career development coordinator for New Hanover High School. Additionally, she served at Communities and Schools, which is a great partner of ours, by the way, as the Baby Fast program support person group leader. Mrs. Jordan received her bachelor's degree in biological sciences from North Carolina State University, and master's degree in school counseling from North Carolina Central University.
You have heard the recommendation. Do I hear a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? It is approved.
Ms. Jordan? And you got a few folks with you.
I do. I have a crowd that supports me as I support students here in Hanover County. I have my husband, Vernon Jordan, one of our 3 children, Claire, with my mother, Joyce Shield, my father, Calvin Shield, his wife, Francine Shield, and my aunt. I have a lot of support. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to watching.
Mr. Shields, didn't realize you were out there. If you'd stand up, please. Mr. Shields. Among other things, Mr. Shields had to put up with my children at Gregory for several years, but she served on our board graciously and brought a lot to this board, and we just want to say thank you for the service you gave to us.
I asked her if she'd like to come back. She said she was free right now, but I don't think she meant free to come back. But we miss you. Great contribution.
Okay. Is that it?
That concludes the administrative recommendation.
Very good. Next item on the agenda is the Head Start report from Mr. Shell.
Bruce, I don't think it's you.
I hadn't said anything yet.
They don't know how much fun these board meetings can be.
Okay, we've got some requirements here and important information for you in your package and on the wall here. You have the demographics for the new year, and they're very similar to what we've had in the past, but we have 66 children on the waiting list and 260 children enrolled in the program. That's very similar to what we've done the last, I guess it's our 4th year.
And this is the end of the year enrollment.
I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon, that's the end of year enrollment. You also have an expenditure report coming up. And that's the month of May, so it's the 1 month ending in our new fiscal year, which ends April 30th. That's why I assumed the prior report matched it. But nothing special to report, but things are moving forward. At our last meeting, we talked about the very positive report audit that the Head Start got, the federal audit. So they're doing great things there. And then the last item that we have is a required evaluation by this board. I would hope you will vote for it, but it's a cost of living adjustment. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Smiles to present that to you. Smiles, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Shell. Thank you. It's a very simplistic application, but it is required for the governing body to approve. It's the COLA grant, which is the cost of living adjustment, which is a 1% increase in salaries, which would be amending our current budget. So it would be a supplement piece of $19,315. So we're required, as typical in our grant requirements, to meet the non-federal match, which is your 4829. So I'm bringing you before you an action item that needs approval for supplemental funding for our program.
I would ask that the board approve the recommendation.
Move for approval.
Second.
All right, I've got a motion and a second. I do have one question of understanding. Why it did not appear as new business? I mean, we...
Because technically now you're acting as the Head Start board, so it's a Head Start item.
Oh, okay. So it could come to us as information and not have to be new business for us to consider. Okay. All right.
Okay, is that right?
All right. So I have a motion and a second. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next item for information. Foundation Board, Wayne Bullard. I will premise this by saying I'm the one who has asked Mr. Bullard to investigate this. I have been to several National School Board Association conferences, and almost invariably at every one of them there is discussion about public school systems having foundations, because there's a lot of things that all of us have received the information from Mr. Bullard that foundations can do that school systems cannot do. So I will now turn it over to Mr. Bullard to tell us what he has found out, and I would simply say this is here as information so we can move forward potentially with doing something.
Thank you, Chairman Higgins. As you can see from the memorandum I prepared, there are a lot of issues involved with foundations. First of all, they would have to, in order to make it feasible, it would have to be a tax-exempt organization. In order to encourage people to make donations, the donations would need to be deductible. And in order to do that, it would have to qualify under one of the sections of the Internal Revenue Code, the most common being a 501c3 entity. I'm not a tax law expert, so I can't answer all the questions, but there would have to be a process to apply and obtain approval for tax-exempt status. Once that is done, there would be limitations on what the foundation could do. As you can see from the statute I quoted in paragraph 1 of the memo, there's a statute that specifically authorizes LEAs to create and control foundations. However, there is a restriction on that. One of the restrictions is that the foundation is not to engage in partisan political activity or policy advocacy. Those terms aren't really defined. So one of the big questions is whether or not advocating for a school bond would be allowed by your foundation, and that's not clear because it's not clear, it's not defined. The terms are not defined. Is a school bond policy advocacy? Is it partisan political activity? Probably not. I don't know, but I could see an argument that it would be. So that's something we would probably need you would probably need clarification on from the Attorney General's office or the School of Government or someone with experience in that before you decided to have a foundation do that type of thing for you. A foundation is a separate entity, so it would have to have a separate board of directors. It would have to keep separate books. It would probably have to file an informational tax return. It would probably need accounting and legal services. It is not clear whether or not you as a school board could provide those services to the foundation, or whether the foundation would have to hire people or pay professionals to do that themselves. As my memo stated, there is a statute specifically allowing, or two different statutes that specifically allow universities and community colleges like UNCW and Cape Fear Community College to use their staff to provide professional services to their foundations. For instance, the chief financial officer of UNCW or Cape Fear Community College could assist their foundation with doing their books. Or their staff, the finance staff, could do the same. There is not, that I could find, a similar statute allowing local boards of education to let their staff do work for their foundation. So that's another question that remains unanswered that we would need further guidance on. However, it does worry me that because the legislature chose to specifically authorize universities and community colleges to let their staff work for their foundations and chose not to specifically authorize school boards to do that, the implication could be that school boards are not allowed to do that. But that doesn't mean you can't still go forward with a foundation. It would just mean the foundation would have to rely on its own resources for those types of services. There are a lot of potential benefits to having a foundation, and I've listed some of those in there also. One is privacy. Some donors like to be anonymous, and not the foundation would not be a public entity. As far as I could tell, it would not be subject to the public records laws, would not be subject to the open meetings laws. So if someone donates to the foundation, the public readily couldn't find out who made the donation, whereas if someone writes a check to the New Hanover County Board of Education, that check would probably be a public record at some point in time. The foundation has more flexibility in hiring and firing employees because they're not covered by the laws and regulations that apply to school boards. Foundation being private would not have to provide the same type of due process protections to its employees. A foundation is not subject to the property disposal laws that require public bodies such as the Board of Education to declare excess property surplus and then sell it to the highest bidder after a process. That would come into play if someone wanted to donate real estate or personal property to the school board. If they donated it directly to the school board wanted to dispose of it to use the proceeds, the school board would have to go through a process, which can be done, but it is a little bit time consuming and there's some cost and delays involved. A foundation could just turn around and sell it after private negotiation and then pay the money over to the school board. And this is something that I'm not an expert on either, which would be the laws regarding electioneering and lobbying. It's not clear to what extent a foundation could actually engage in lobbying on behalf of the school board. It does, if it's a partisan political activity, as I read before, it would be prohibited, but it's hard to tell, what issues are to be considered partisan and which ones are to be considered nonpartisan. So that's something that we would need a little more clarification on. And also, there's a little bit more flexibility with regard to donations. If the donations are made to the foundation, those donations don't have to be shared with charter schools. Under current law, if someone donates money to the New Hanover County Board of Education and doesn't specify in the donation how it's to be used, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mary Hazel, but I believe that would be shared with the charter schools. And sometimes people make donations and don't make that specification in their grant. And they, even though they didn't intend any of it to be shared with charter schools under the law, it might have to be. If you have a foundation raising the money, then that's not an issue. So those are some of the main benefits that I could think of. There are probably others as well. If all the board wants to do is just use a vehicle to raise money, I don't know if a foundation is required. I mean, it would be up to you, but you can have your staff, you can hire a fundraiser and have that person an employee of the board without creating a foundation. Creating a foundation does have complexity with tax laws and compliance and accounting fees and all of that type of thing. So that's something to consider. If you want to use the foundation to engage in advocacy, such as for a school bond or things like that, it may be something that you could only do through a foundation. So though that is the information that I gathered, I'll be glad to gather additional information. What I would need is some direction from the board as to exactly what you want the foundation to do. And then I could look into in a little more detail whether doing a foundation could accomplish what your goals are. Is it mainly fundraising? Is it mainly advocacy? Is it to handle gifts and donations, or are there some other purposes for the foundation that the board is interested in? So I'll be glad to try to answer any questions.
My feeling is that it would handle donations. I don't think that you can't have a tax exempt status if you're going to be doing politicking or lobbying. I mean, you can't have political donations that are tax deductible, so you can't have a 501c3 status. So that would seem to negate the two. So to me, the idea of a foundation was attractive because we could fundraise for those areas that don't get enough funding right now. We've talked about athletics, we've talked about special education, we've talked about some of those areas that we're always looking for arts, we're always looking for funding sources, and a foundation was very attractive because you could, and it would be easier to fundraise for those specific items. So that to me was the attractiveness of a foundation, and you could get a 501c3 status for that, I think, unless, in absence of a statute prohibiting it. It would seem to me to be easier to form a foundation for that. I don't see the purpose of forming a foundation for lobbying purposes.
Typically with a foundation, you're looking for large donations. The small donations typically are parents who are giving to the school where their child goes to. Athletic boosters is an example of that. Band boosters are an example of that. Most foundations and school systems are looking for that corporate size donation and not that $1,500 ad in a football kind of program. Because those folks want to give to the school where their kid goes directly.
Wayne, did you determine what other school districts do have foundations?
I did ask around with my colleagues, and those that responded, based on those, not everybody responded, so this is not a complete list, and I didn't bring a copy of the list, but there were 5 or 6 that I'm aware of, based on responses that I got from other school board attorneys across the state. There could be more, but that's all I was able to determine based on the email I sent on the listserv that I participate in with other school board attorneys across the state.
How did they compare to our school system? Was it the same size school districts?
It varied.
Urban, rural, what?
Some were big, some were small. So several of them were created many, many years ago, and the school board attorneys really didn't know much about them, to be honest with you. There was something that may have been created in the 80s or 90s, and it's just been there, and it's not something that the current school board attorney really knew much about, didn't have anything to do with creating, so it really wasn't all that helpful. I was not able to find any other school board that had created a foundation in North Carolina recently.
Because typically what happens is that foundation has its own board, and it becomes a separate entity from the school system. So you may have a hand in setting it up, but over time, its direction may change from what the original intent of the setup was, because it is an independent group in most respects.
I think I looked into it a couple months ago as well, and it seems like North Carolina, about 50% of the country, the LEAs in the country have foundations, is what the research that I found. North Carolina is a lot lower percentage-wise than that. But it also seems like that the reason why you set up a foundation is, and whether the board's helping or someone does it individually, is to have a separate entity that is fundraising, or that the board can go to and say, hey, we're thinking about X, whether it be athletics or whether it be special education, see what you can do. And then you have community leaders that are on that board that can go out. So it's separate from the LEA or the school board, but at the same point has a relationship with the school board that they can work with, and that's what.
A typical board has community leaders who you can tap into, and most foundations have a signature event or two to raise funds.
Yep.
And Wayne, we would assume that no public funds would go into that. School funds would go into that. It would be private funds. I mean, if you can't use staff to do work under it, I wouldn't think you could use school dollars.
That's a question that I didn't have a clear answer to either. I mean, the statute does say that an LEA can establish, control, and operate a nonprofit corporation. Now, that doesn't specifically say the LEA can use any of its money to do that, but I don't know how you would establish, control, and operate without using some of your money. So I think it's implied in that you could use some of your money to do that, but how much, I don't know. That's another question that I'd have to get more clarification on from the experts.
Well, and I guess it would also be, can you indirectly use money by using staff? Because you would have to somehow account for, with the paperwork and starting up the if there's a charter or whatever, we would have to be doing all that work.
Right. And that goes back to what I said earlier about the fact that the legislature has specifically authorized universities and community colleges to use their staff to assist their foundations, but has not enacted a specific statute allowing LEAs to do the same thing.
So in the absence of any kind of legislation, what usually happens?
Well, I think the implication is probably that the legislature has decided not to allow it, because the legislature has specifically authorized the other two entities to do it and not school boards. The implication is they chose not to allow school boards to do it. Now, the other argument to that would be, how do you establish and control a foundation without using some of your staff's time? So,
look for volunteers?
that would be one way to do it, or have the foundation hire its own people.
Well, I can't really do that until you have some funding to pay them.
Right. And I think that my opinion is that you are probably allowed to use a little bit of seed money to get the foundation going. But after that, it would have to be self-sustaining in terms of hiring its own employees and hiring accountants and professionals to advise it on things like
And if
that.
you're putting a foundation together and you get the right folks on the board, then hopefully you would get some donated time to do some of the legwork to set that group up.
Kind of like we did with CTE, really.
So the question would be, what's the board's wish in terms of going forward? Do you want us to continue to look into this? Just some direction going forward.
I, for one, would like to explore further, not to reinvent the wheel. I'm not interested in reinventing the wheel, but to get some thoughts from some of these North Carolina school board associations that do have, or school boards that do have the foundation, you know, more detail about what they feel like they can and cannot do, and, you know, potentially explore the possibility of reaching out to the state legislature to grant us that same exemption they give to the university and community colleges. Whether that happens or not, I don't know, but I mean, nothing ventured, nothing gained.
I think that if we're looking, or if someone is looking at forming a foundation, I think it should be separate from the school board. I think the first thing that we need to do is decide whether or not there is community desire and community involvement. I don't think our board should be forming a foundation. The main reason to form a foundation is to do it because the community wants it, because the community has the ability to raise money. So I think the most important thing when deciding a foundation is to decide whether or not the community wants it, and it's going to serve any purpose in the community, not for us. We do what we can do.
I know we've had one inquiry about a foundation over the last year. We can call the School Board Association. We might as well get some benefit from our dues and see what their legal folks tell us in regards to foundations. And as far as community interest, I would let you guys have the influence in the community, so I'd be interested if you know folks who have an interest in forming one. We'll go
Well, I
from
mean,
there.
you know, the chamber had an educational foundation, but it no longer is New Hanover County. It is southeastern North Carolina. So, I mean, the days when we could kind of count on the mini grants and things such as that have now gone by the wayside. So, and I think it's, I mean, for me, it is totally worth continuing to explore, but I mean, I'll do whatever the board says.
I'm supportive. I think it's worth looking at too.
Yeah, to see what benefits are derived maybe from other systems and how they set it up. I think it'd be worth, that
Nothing
information.
ventured, nothing gained.
Yeah. I agree with Dr. Markley. Let's start with our School Board Association and let them help us and give some input. How, do you know how private schools, I know they're not controlled by the legislature, but how do they go about it?
I didn't really look into private schools, but they have more flexibility than you do anyway, just by the fact that they're not covered by all the restrictions and regulations that govern public entities.
The charter schools have the same as,
Charter schools are treated the same as you
we.
for those purposes. Charter schools are public schools.
yeah, I understand that, but they do have some leeway in some areas that we
Yeah,
don't.
some areas, but I don't think they have any more leeway in fundraising or lobbying or anything like that.
I'm just trying to think of
The
sources
rules
that.
regarding charter schools in those areas should be the same as applied to you.
Okay.
All right, then, does that help you?
That does. I appreciate that. And one of the faculty members at the UNC School of Government who has the most expertise in nonprofit entities is actually on an extended leave, and she comes back in August.
Okay.
So that'll be a valuable resource for me to get some more information. So once she gets back and I have a chance to discuss with her, I'll have some more information and I can bring something back to you or give you another memo or whatever the board desires.
Okay, very good. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item, board-supported field trips, Appendix F, Dr. Smith.
Yes, annually, we bring before you a list of board-supported field trips, and the list is included in the attachment, and there are no recommended changes for the 17-18 school year.
Mind you, this doesn't keep a school from doing its own field trips, but these are the ones that we support central office-wise.
I guess a better word is say funded by, because we support many other ones for the decision, but we fund these, right?
Yes, ma'am. And I'm not sure, I can check, I think there's some specific language in the policy. I'll make sure that this recommendation aligns with that language.
Yes, we did shore that up.
Any other discussion about this?
This is really information and doesn't
Yes.
require action.
Right. All right, next item, item C, attestation of school improvement team meetings, 2016, 2017. Again, Dr. Smith.
Yes, thank you. Again, annually, we bring before the board signed attestations from our schools indicating that they are in compliance with the laws regarding school improvement plans. The information listed is in regards to the processes that they follow and also the meetings. In addition, with this recommendation, we also have for your information attestations from our high school principals in regards to their compliance with the graduation project process as well regarding fundraisers.
Anybody have any questions?
Do you ever review the minutes from those meetings?
Not specifically. If I have, if a question comes to me or if there is a concern, then I have had conversations with principals, but not specifically. They, however, are published on our school website, although they may be a little difficult to find right now because of recent issues we had with being in compliance with ADA, but they do post those minutes and make them available to the public as well.
Okay, and the members of the team are published as well? Is it
Yes,
each
ma'am.
level?
Yes, that information is posted on all school websites.
Good. I know for some schools, it's a challenge to find the diverse representation that they want, but you have to be accountable, right?
Yes, and I think often it starts with really strong representation at the beginning of the school year, and sometimes that does wane a little bit, but our principals are encouraged to, reach out again to primarily the organizations or their PTAs, to encourage parents to be active in this process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, then we'll move on to the next section, which is consensus items, personnel, Appendix H. Dr. Welmers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Request the board approve the personnel matters as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Next item, change of school assignments, Dr. Holliday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, recommend that you release this student to a neighboring school district on the parent's request.
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Next item on the agenda is new business. Legion Stadium scoreboard revenues, Appendix J, Dr. Markley.
We discussed this at the last meeting as information that I would like to change our initial plan related to revenue from the school scoreboard and revert all revenue directly to New Hanover High School. I would ask for approval.
Move for approval.
Second.
Now, that's if they sell.
Correct.
to it. Yeah.
If Hoggard uses it and sells ads, they would obviously,
Yeah, like a soccer tournament or something. Yeah. Okay. I've got a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Item B, 2017-2018 Budget Resolution, Appendix K. Ms. Small.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I request the board's approval of the budget resolution, which is consistent with the recommended budget changes that we presented, I guess in May, before it went to the county commissioner for approval. Since then, the state and the county have both approved their budgets. Any changes made based on that original request were just based on the final state budget and salary schedules. And the total recommended budget is $260,687,224. And then the detailed budget book will be available within the next few weeks after your approval. So I
Okay.
request
Move for approval.
Have a motion, or hear a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? Yes, sir, Mr. Michelle.
Mary Hazel, you were good enough to provide an analysis of the positions, and there are 3,848 positions, and they're funded by the state, by the county commissioners, by federal and other funds. 880 of those are locally funded. And what you were good enough to do was to go in and talk about the compensation changes for those employees by virtue of their category.
Correct.
Right? So I appreciate it, but I still had a couple more questions about it.
Certainly.
Okay. So, for example, teachers and instructional support, we have 1,855 of those folks, and you indicate an average increase of 3.3% with no change in beginning step and $30 per month increase at the top of the scale, which is step 25 and above. Is that right?
That is correct.
Can you elaborate a little bit on it?
The state scale starts at step 0, so any experienced teacher who's returning will be at step 1, so they would receive an increase. But basically, teachers we hire for the new year would be starting at the same level as teachers that started a year ago. So that doesn't involve raises because they're new employees. Those at the top of the scale, several years ago, the state changed the pay scale, and the new scale doesn't go as high as the old one did. And so we have several teachers that are grandfathered at the top at those higher salaries. So for those that are kind of between what is now the top of the scale and what used to be, some of those will be getting this increase of $30. Others made more before that, so they're still grandfathered. And so the state has also approved a top of the scale bonus of $385 for everyone above state 25. So some of them would be getting the raise and the bonus. Others would only be getting the bonus because they were already topped out at a higher salary.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, a lot. I didn't understand it that way.
I know you, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I know you told us this before, but what was the differential between the old scale and the new scale for at the top?
I don't recall the top of the old scale, but it went up probably at least 60,000. I can't remember, but it was significantly above the current top of the scale, which is now $51,130.
And your next category is central office administrators to receive 1.7% step increase, contracted salary increases, and $1,000 state raise applied to the salary schedule for an average increase of 3%. You elaborate a little bit
So
on that?
last year, the board approved new salary schedules, new local schedules for both central office administrators and non-certified support, which I'm sure we'll get to those in a minute. But the central office administrators have or experience increases of 1.7%. So we're using the mandated state raise of $1,000 for every 12-month employee, or $83 a month, to sort of help fund that step increase. So for some of them, because that's sort of the minimum increase for everybody next year, is either $83 a month or whatever the proportional equivalent is if you're part-time. So they'd be getting that, but it also funded a good portion of the step increase. So depending on where you are on the scale, you know, $1,000 is going to vary based on the percentage, but it helped fund that for all the non-teacher scales.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm rocking
Go
and
ahead.
rolling here, excuse me. Under principals, you said a 1.7% step. Is that self-explanatory?
The principals, last year you approved a new scale for principals as well, and so most of our local principals received significant pay increases last year. This year, the state is going to do a whole new pay scale for them. Basically, the difference between the new state pay scale and whatever our pay scale is becomes their supplement. It's a minimum of 10%, but for many it's much higher than that. I think the average is about 22%. So really, this changed the base of what the state's going to pay. Didn't really affect the principals. For us would be getting a step increase. What did change for them, which will be a whole new group of merit bonuses for principals that will be state funded.
There's a very different philosophy statewide coming in with principal pay. The work we did last year was sort of a step ahead of the state in setting our base. So what the state did with the base and what we did last year have dovetailed together fairly well. But the state is now putting in several bonuses. And one of those bonuses is tied to student growth over a 3-year period. And so it's potential for principals' pay to go up and down based on what the school they're at has done related to growth. And that's going to be that's a new concept for principals. And then there are some one-time bonuses that are also in the new principal pay plan related to how they perform that year. So it becomes a whole lot more complicated figuring out principal pay. But base-wise, we're in line with the plan we put in last year. The bonus piece is something we'll have to explain to principals in pretty good detail of how they can qualify for that. But that's a shift philosophically from the state in how they've traditionally handled principal pay.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one thing that is noted, they took longevity from teachers when they revised the scale 2 years ago. This revision of scale eliminates longevity for principals and assistant principals.
And it seems like you've always had a challenge with assistant principals versus the teacher scale.
Right. I would like to say before the state did a new scale several years ago, all school administrator pay was ultimately tied to principal pay scales a percentage above. And then when the new teacher scales happened, that broke that tie. So they weren't tied. So some of our principals, and up until last year, and most of our assistant principals were actually paid as teachers because they made more as teachers than they did on the assistant principal scale. The new assistant principal scale is now tied back to the teacher scale, but it's 17% above, so it's significant. But as an offset to that, they lost longevity. They'll still be held harmless to that. I've already calculated that, and only about 5 or 6 of them will be held harmless. Most of them will be receiving raises under this.
Okay, so I guess the bottom line question, having said all that, are there any employees that are not included in some form of elevation? Now, I know you said you could have an employee that was say a third-year teacher, and then a new teacher comes in and they're paid the same because of that first, 6 years, and you really can't do much about that, right?
Well, I guess what I was saying is a new teacher this year makes the same as a new teacher last year, but if they were here at least a half a year, they're going to get a step increase. So anyone who was here more than half of the year last year, in most cases, will get a raise. Where they're not going to is when if they're not a teacher, because there is a bonus for the top of the scale, but non-teachers at the top of the scale or already grandfathered above scales could possibly not receive a raise. It's going to be a very small number. I can't tell you yet because we hadn't calculated all of them, but there won't be very many, but there could be some.
And we've talked about bringing the compensation committee back together.
Yes, last month you approved that, so we're waiting to finalize all of these scales, so when we bring that committee back, we can look at the most current numbers. I would anticipate that group meeting probably sometime in August for the first time this year.
And what do you hope for that group to accomplish?
A couple of things. We're going to have to look at, philosophically, the state has decided they want to fund the front end of the scale at better than the back end of the scale. Their philosophy is higher dollars to bring them into the profession and not to reward longevity. We can disagree philosophically with that, but I think we need to look at our supplement schedule, and our supplement schedule needs to reflect our values in terms of that. So we currently do a flat supplement for the most part. Do we need to adjust that? The other issue is, do we want to go from percentage supplement to a flat fixed supplement? And the reason is every time the state increases the base pay for a teacher, that percentage dollar increases as well. And that this year alone was about, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, was over $1 million of that extra money that we've had to bring back in from the state. So we need to look at that whole structure. Does it match philosophically where we want to be? And does a fixed supplement serve us better than a percentage supplement?
This talks about employees. Are there any other compensation issues outside of this? I guess the school board.
The school board's increase, because you're not technically employees, that was included in the budget at a 3% increase.
At 3%?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I think that's it.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions? All right. Adam, do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a substitute motion.
All right.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
I support this budget, but with one exception. I'd like to see that we table the increase to the school board until after the compensation committee has met and evaluated the total compensation, and then bring that back to the board for a vote. That's my motion. Accept this budget with the exception of tabling the raises to the school board members.
I would second that.
All right. We have a motion, a second. Is there any discussion on that? All right. Hearing none, then we will vote on the substitute motion first. All those in favor of the substitute motion of tabling the raise for the school board until the compensation committee has met, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Well, I didn't get a chance to ask a question.
I asked you if you had a
I'm sorry.
question.
Well, I guess I was not fast enough.
I'm sorry.
So you're saying when they meet, what decision, does that committee make the decision?
Oh, no. Committee brings back a recommendation to the board.
But that's a recommendation.
That's
Still
right.
puts us where we are right now.
I'm sorry. I didn't understand.
It would still, if they recommend that we not accept the raise, or we hold off until,
Well, the board would have the latitude to take the recommendation of the compensation committee or not. The board could approve these raises retroactive back to July the 1st if it chose to.
oh, okay. I don't have a problem delaying it. I just want to make sure the logistics is not cumbersome so that the
Right.
committee doesn't control.
Good question.
Okay?
All right,
Sorry.
well then, once again, I will call the question. All those in favor of the substitute motion, which would be to postpone the pay raises until after the compensation committee has met and gone through its process, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay?
No.
Nay. It passes 4-3. The amended motion does, so. And your motion included approving the budget subject to the.
It wasn't an amended motion, it was a substitute motion.
Well, substitute motion. I mean, a substitute motion's an amended motion. I mean, he amended the original motion.
Who were the three no's?
Huh?
Who were the three no's?
Mr. Hayes, myself, and Ms. Kavanaugh. All right. Then if that's the case, I don't think we have to vote again. It's already been. Okay. All right, next item up, Child Development Center contract. Dr. Holliday.
Excuse me, if
What?
you said that it is an amended motion, then we have to vote on the
All right,
amended
then
motion.
we will vote again,
Main
okay?
motion.
All those in favor of the adopting the recommended budget
As amended.
as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
No.
Nay. Okay, 4-3, they adopted the budget. All right, next item. Now, the child development contract.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I recommend that you approve this contract with the Child Development Center. This is a longtime partner that we have used with our special ed child find situation in pre-K. So I ask that you approve this contract.
You've heard the recommendation. Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? It is approved. Next item, certified personnel recommendation for one-year contract, Appendix M, Dr. Welmers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Recommend these individuals for a one-year contract. These are the last of the folks from this year that would be moving to next year.
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? It is approved. Next item, participant contracts, Appendix N, Dr. Smith.
Yes, would request the board's approval of the contract with Participate. That organization was formerly known to us as VIF. This is the group that we work with for the recruitment for our teachers who serve us at the International School of Gregory in the immersion program. They also provide curriculum services to us for both Gregory and Forest Hills. And we are in a third year, we're in year 3 of a 3-year service agreement with them, but the costs for this, the specific costs were not outlined. That's why we're bringing this to the board for your approval.
Okay. You have heard the recommendation.
Move for approval.
Have a motion?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just one. How is this contract different than the current year?
We have some additional teachers because we are expanding to 7th grade.
Is that all?
Yes.
Okay.
Just the additional teachers.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Excuse me. All right, item F, 2017-2018 Curriculum Course Guide Updates, Appendix O, Dr. Smith.
Yes, last year we brought to you a new course at Holly Shelter Middle School. It was intermediate piano. We've seen a lot of support and success for that, and so we're bringing to you a recommendation to continue that course in grades 7th and 8th.
At Holly Shelter.
At Holly Shelter.
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item G, change order for New Hanover High School cafeteria renovations, Appendix P. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We recommend approval of change order number 1 to Stonehenge Building Incorporated in the amount of $55,898. This is for the New Hanover High School cafeteria renovation project, which is funded in the 2016-17 capital budget.
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Why? What's it for? I mean, yeah, that's, again, a concern I always have. We get bids and then change orders start showing up.
Well, I anticipate your question, and
Good.
because change orders are not a very popular thing.
No.
Change orders are going to happen on every construction project. Fortunately for us, we bring very few change orders to you as a board to approve, which tells me and should tell you that we're doing a very good job of managing those change orders.
I'm not taking issue with that. I'm asking why.
This particular one is the ceiling above the cafeteria. There was a lay-in ceiling at some point built underneath the original ceiling.
The original ceiling was a plaster ceiling, which serves as a fire separation between floors. Over the years, there's been a lot of work done in that building. The fire ceiling was compromised. There were holes in it. It was a lot worse than anticipated. We anticipated some repair, therefore we actually bid a unit cost for those repairs. But we did not anticipate the significant amount of repairs that we found once the low ceiling was taken out completely.
Okay.
So it was an unforeseen condition. We don't like uncovering those, but I think in this particular case, it did uncover a safety issue that I'm glad we're addressing.
Okay.
Is your thinking that the unforeseen condition is one that when they bid on the project, there's no way they would have known what was under there?
There's no way you would have known what was there without removing that ceiling completely. To be perfectly honest, we could have done a little better in our guess at what we were anticipating. I think we underestimated the amount of work that we found. We knew there were going to be some repairs. We had obviously investigated that, but once the ceiling was completely down, they were more significant than we anticipated. But short answer to your question, there's no way in bidding the project that a bidder could have possibly known the extent, therefore could not have submitted a bid for that work.
But you're still within budget.
We are within budget, but it does take all of the project contingency funds that we had budgeted. That is why I'm saying if we do uncover anything else, we would go to the savings from the New Hanover High School bond project.
When someone bids out for this kind of project, do they not incorporate problems like this coming up within the bid?
They do not. They're only going to incorporate in their bid what we tell them to incorporate. And in this particular case, a way we address something, if it's unknown, we ask them to give us a unit cost for that repair, and then we tell them to include in their bid a quantity.
Okay.
So that way every bidder is bidding the same thing. So that's what we did, and that also enables us to get competitive bids on the unit cost, so that if something like this occurs, at least you know you're getting a fair price for the work.
And unfortunately, this is one of the oldest buildings in our system, and this has had multiple renovations, and evidently they don't always keep track of the last time they went up into the ceiling.
But this is a rather substantial change order. This is 25% almost of the
Correct, that's why it came to the board.
Contract.
That's why it came to the board, and that's why the policy's in place for these. But I did some quick calculations, and if you look at the net area of the ceiling in the cafeteria, this works out to be about 20% of that ceiling is in need of some repair. In some cases, it's just filling a hole. It's really easy. In other cases, there's a 4x4 section of that plaster that's missing or has deteriorated to the point where it's no longer providing the fire separation that we need.
And the other problem is if we don't do this change order, we can't complete the renovation.
Does this set back the timeline for the?
We have agreed with the contractor to add 14 days, which we're hoping does not take all of that. We think some work can go on simultaneously. But the contract date would be extended to August 18th.
When's the first day of school?
For students, the 29th.
So there wouldn't be any use of the cafeteria by then anyway?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further questions?
Well, no.
Well, if you have a question, feel free to ask it. All right. All those in favor of the change order signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? It is approved. All right. Let's see here.
You ready for a motion?
Hold it.
You can make the announcements first.
Yeah, we'll make the announcements first.
Yes.
Anybody have any correspondence they want to share? All right. Announcements. The next regular meeting of New Hanover County Board of Education is scheduled for Tuesday, August the 1st.
It's gonna be at Spencer, isn't it?
Correct. They'll
Yes.
actually start the renovations on this building tomorrow, Eddie?
So-
Okay, so it'd be August the 1st at 5:30 at the Spencer Building, which is next door, well, beyond Lake Forest, where we used to meet. Summer school graduation ceremony will be held on Thursday, August the 17th, 2017 at 7 o'clock p.m. in the auditorium of Snipes Academy of Arts and Design. E.A. Laney's Gym Building dedication and ribbon cutting will be held on Wednesday, August 23rd at 10 a.m. Anything else we need to?
Yes, we have a policy committee meeting on August 1st before the board meeting at 4 o'clock at the Spencer Complex, and that would be room 104. Okay, thank you.
And we have I don't have it with me, the compensation committee is having a meeting on Thursday, the
27.
No, not compensation,
That's the,
school.
That
Class size
meeting,
Class size committee.
Yeah.
that meeting
That's
is,
the days and
Thursday, the
Mr. Ward.
27th at 1 PM in, it's conference room 301 of the administration building.
okay. All right,
I move we go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-13, comma 11, parenthesis A, parenthesis 115C-319, 321, and 402.
and on the other first one, you should have included the 6, I believe, because it's personnel, you left the 6 off.
I'm sorry, and 6.
They didn't have it down there.
and for those who are in the audience, we will come out of closed session. There will be no business coming out of closed session. So,
Okay,
5 minutes to get there?
yeah, 5 minutes to let everybody